Alright, so in this video I'm gonna actually show you how to use all the strategies that I gave you on the video that is an introduction to the SAT reading section and the video that has all the tips. If you haven't seen that video, I suggest you go watch it. So here I'm just gonna show you on an actual practice test how to do it, and I'm gonna show you how to get to the practice test. So on the College Board, which is the people that are that are the owners, I guess, of the SAT and that run the SAT, they have eight official practice tests total. You can buy them. Sorry about that. My phone keeps ringing every video. They have 8 official practice tests. You can either buy them together in a book, or you can find them online. They're all free online. So let me show you how to get there. You can just write SAT practice test, and then there's 8 of them, so you can just do number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm gonna do 5 with you guys because I thought that was one of the easiest, and it was just straightforward. And then you just click the first link, and it takes you to the first test. It's loading, and you can see right there, and it's gonna have all 4 sections. So I'm gonna switch engines so I can write on the document. And this is a reading test. I know it looks kind of far, but I'm gonna be zooming in, so hang in there. I'm gonna go over just the first passage of that reading test of number 5, so that I can show you how we can do this strategy. So again, if you don't know what strategies I'm talking about, go back to my previous video, the video about the introduction to the reading section. I'll link it in the description box, and go ahead and watch that one so you can know what strategies I'm talking about, or else this won't really make sense. So the strategies that I talked about was, the first one was kind of like just read the questions first. So once you get to the test, you open it, you're going to go to the question, you're going to read the questions first, and you're going to annotate the text based on what the questions are. I'm just fixing my pen. Okay. So you're going to read the questions first. We read only the questions, not the answers. So over the course of the passage, the primary focus shifts from. Over the course of the passage. This is a whole passage question. For whole passage questions, like the strategies that I showed you said, we don't do anything because we need to read the whole passage to be able to answer that question. So number 2, the main purpose of the first paragraph is to. So this is a locatable reference point question. As the strategies say, in a locatable reference point question, you're going to make either a dot next to the line number or a line next to the paragraph number. So here in this case, they gave us the first paragraph. So we're going to make a line next to paragraph 1. So here is paragraph 1. We're going to make a big line next to it so that when we get to paragraph 1, we know there's a question related to this. When we're done reading it, we go answer the question. So now we go back to our questions. Right? Again, I'm not reading any answer choices. I'm not reading the passage. I'm just annotating the text with what I'm given. So number 3, it can reasonably be inferred that Irma, the waitress, thinks Lemmy is through eating line 37 because. So again, locatable reference point question, they give us line 37. So we're going to go to line 37. Going to look for it, and we're going to make a dot next to it. You don't have to actually be like, okay, 35, 36, 37, found it. You can just eyeball it, like 35 is right here, they mark it, so you can just make a dot somewhere here. Make sure your dot is big. If you make it small, you're going to miss it. I've done that, and then I end up not answering that question because I didn't notice my dot. So make sure you make your dot big. Number 4. Lemmy's primary impression of the party of 4, line 42, is that they. So then we get line 42 right here. It's a locatable reference point question. We go to line 30. Sorry, I forgot the line number. Line 42. We go to line 42, and we make a big dot next to it. Then we know there's a question there. Number 5, which choice provides the best evidence for the answer to the previous question? We have to answer the previous question to actually be able to answer that one, so we don't do anything for that one. Next question. The narrator indicates that Lemmy finally closes the history book because. This is a non-locatable reference point question, so we don't actually have a paragraph number to make a line in. We don't have a line number to make a dot next to, so we don't do anything. We don't do anything to the actual passage, but what we're going to do is we're going to underline what we're going to look for. So in this question, we're going to look for the part where Lemmy finally closes the history book. Okay, so with your pencil, what you would do in your test is you underline what you're looking for. For non-locatable reference point questions, you underline what you're looking for. We're looking for the place where Lemmy finally closes the history book. Number 7. The primary impression created by the narrator's description of Mr. Peters in lines 74 to 79 is that he is. So this is a locatable reference point question. And in this one, they give us lines 74 through 79. So we're going to go to line 74, 79, in this case, it's a couple of lines. So instead of making a dot, we're going to make a line. So 74 to 79 is going to be like around here. So we make a big line next to it so we know that there's a question there. Next question, number 8. The main idea of the last paragraph is that Mr. Peters, we get last paragraph. It's a locatable reference point question. So we go to the last paragraph right here. And we make a big line next to it so we know that there's a question related to that one. And then is that the last question for this passage? Nope, 2 more. Which choice best supports the conclusion that Mr. Peter wants to attract attention? So go ahead and try to guess what type of question this is. So look at the question. What type of question is this? This would be a non-locatable reference point question. Kind of, I guess you could argue locatable because they give you 4 choices for places, but technically since the question itself doesn't tell us, then it's non-locatable reference point question. So what are we looking for? We're looking for the part where Mr. Peter wants to attract attention, right? So this one is it's going to be more abstract. There's not going to be a specific, usually non-locatable reference point questions. Like, for example, this one right here where number 6, Lemmy finally closes the history book. The sentence, there's going to be a sentence specifically that says something about Lemmy closing the history book with those words. But in this case, number 9, there's not going to be an actual sentence that says Mr. Peters wanted to attract attention because, but there's going to be like a description in which you can assume that Mr. Peters trying to attract attention. So what we're going to do is we're going to look for that part of the passage in which it looks like Mr. Peter wants to attract attention. And then in this case, we're just kind of trying to look for evidence that shows us that Mr. Peter wants to attract attention. So it's kind of like it's like half and half. It's like a combination between like an evidence question and a non-locatable reference point question. And then number 10, so this one's a bit of an odd one. So yeah, sorry about that email. Okay, and then number 10 is used in line 93, becoming most nearly means. So they gave us line 93. So we're going to go to line 93 and make a dot next to it. So like right here. Big dot. All right, and then those are all the questions for this passage, right? Yes. So then if you are once you become a master at this, at annotating the passage, you're going to do this so fast. You're just going to read the question real quick, make a dot or not, continue the next question, next question, next question. This annotation is going to take you barely a minute. And then all you have to do now is read the passage, and you only read it once because remember one of my tips is you answer the questions as you read the passage. So as you read, you answer the question, so you only have to read it once. So basically all you have to do now is just read the passage. You already know what the questions are. Now just read the passage. So one of my tips again is you're going to just glance at the questions. Usually they're going to be in order, but as you read, you want to be actively, you kind of want to have a reason to read. You need to be looking for something, right? So again, they're usually in order. So we're just going to go to number 1. We're going to glance at it, see if we have to keep something in mind as we start reading. So number 1 again is over the course of the passage, the primary focus shifts from. So for that, we need to read the whole passage. So let's just ignore that one for now. Number 2, the main purpose of the first paragraph. Okay, so this question is going to be about the first paragraph. So as we start reading, let's really pay attention to the first paragraph, okay? And again, remember, another one of my tips was you need to try to answer the question before you actually look at the answer choices. So again, the question is just the main purpose of the first paragraph. So as we read, let's think about the main purpose of the first paragraph. And if it helps you while you read, just put purpose next to it, like just really quickly. You don't have to write pretty, it doesn't matter, you can just write purpose really quickly and then you continue. So then we're going to start. The Alcazar restaurant was on Sheridan Road near Devon Avenue. It was long and narrow with tables for two along the walls and tables for four down the middle. The decoration was art modern, except for the series of murals depicting the four seasons and the 6 ferns in the front window. Lemmy sat down at the second table from the cash register and ordered his dinner. The history book, which he propped against the catsup and the glass sugar bowl, had been used by others before him. Blank pages front and back were filled in with maps, drawing, dates, comic cartoons, and organs of the body, also with names and messages no longer clear and never absolutely legible. On nearly every other page there was some marginal notation, either in ink or in very hard pencil. And unless someone had upset a glass of water, the marks on page 177 were from tears. So we want to know the purpose of the first paragraph, just so we can make sure we get a bit of a context. I'm going to read like 2 more sentences. While Lemmy read about the Peace of Paris, signed on the 13th of May, 1814, between France and the Allied powers, his right hand managed again and again to bring food up to his mouth. So the first paragraph, what's its purpose? What does the first paragraph have? Here is just kind of description of the restaurant, right? The Alcazar restaurant, just a description of it, and then they mention a book, and that's it, right? So I would say the purpose is just to introduce the restaurant and to talk about a book. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the answer choices for number 2, and I'm going to look for the answer choice that is closest to mine. And also remember, my other tip is always have evidence. Always have evidence for why you choose an answer and for why you don't choose an answer, okay? So number 2, the main purpose of the first paragraph is to A, introduce the passage's main character by showing his nightly habits. B, indicate the date the passage takes place by presenting period details. C, convey the passage's setting by describing a place and an object. D, foreshadow an event that is described in detail later in the passage. So personally, I'm someone that I read A and I'm like, no, I read B and I'm like, no, like I don't read all of them first and then make a decision. So I think that's a faster way to do it. So I think it's better if you start eliminating as you read the choices. But for now, it's fine. So introduce the passage's main character by showing his nightly habits. Yes, they introduce the passage's main character. But this is why we need to use evidence. This is why we need to think about what we're choosing. That part makes sense. I would understand if you, just because of that part, you're like, oh, it's A, they're introducing the main character. But the thing is, are they showing his nightly habits? That is not accurate. Nothing in the passage says that, right? They are not showing his nightly habits at all. Is there anywhere, go ahead and you can pause it, you can try to read it again. Is there anywhere in this place where they're showing his nightly habits? Does it even say it's at night? Maybe you can argue his nightly habits are to read the history book. But does it say anywhere here that it's at night? It doesn't, right? So we can't assume that it's his nightly habits. So A is incorrect. And again, this whole explanation that I just gave you, it's evidence as to why I am not choosing A. So these are things that you need to be telling yourself when you're taking the test. B, indicate the date the passage takes place by presenting period details. Can we see anywhere in this passage, in this paragraph, does it tell us the time it is? Maybe the word art modern, maybe that makes me kind of think that it's not too late, you know? We can see by here that it's 1945 by the description of the book, but the passage itself doesn't give us any sense of what year it is. It could be 1600s for all I know, you know? It could be now. We have no idea. It doesn't tell us anything about this, what time it is, what period it is. And then D, foreshadow an event that is described in detail later in the passage. Unless you might think that you can't really answer that until you read later, until you continue reading the passage. When you continue reading, you realize that that's not right. But either way, you can, C seems like the correct answer, and then for D, if you think like, oh, well, I'm not sure because I haven't finished reading the passage, but is there anything here that could foreshadow, really, honestly, like, it's just a description of a restaurant, saying there's tables, there's chairs, there's a window. Lemmy sat down at this one table and ordered food, and he started reading a book, and then just description of a book. Can that really foreshadow anything? Not really. And you can just choose C if you want to, if you're not sure about that one. And as you continue reading, you'll realize feel even more confident that that one's incorrect. But then why is C correct? Again, we have to use evidence as to why we think something is correct. One is the most close to what I said. I said that all they were doing was just describing the restaurant and describing the book and introducing the book. And that's basically what they're saying here. They're saying they're conveying the setting by describing a place and an object. A place, the restaurant, and an object, the book. So, and you can see that again here. They're just describing the restaurant, describing the book. And that's all they're saying. And is that not a setting? It is. They're setting up the story. It's going to happen in the restaurant, right? And they're just trying to convey the passage's setting. So C is the correct answer. So now that you see what I mean by evidence, I'm going to talk a little less, or like explain a little less for each for each choice. Hopefully you understand now what I mean by evidence. So I'm just gonna really try to do evidence for the correct answer choice, not for each of the wrong answer choices. You do need to do that by yourself though, in your brain. You don't have to drag it out as much as I did. I'm just doing it so that you can really understand what I mean. But you don't have to drag it out as much as I did. You can just give yourself a quick reason for why A, B, and D are wrong, right? You don't have to do that. You don't have to like write an essay about it. But just make sure you're telling yourself why your answer choices are wrong, and the evidence has to be from the text. Your reason has to be because it says nowhere here that this happened or something like that. Okay? Now we're going to move on, keep reading, but we have to glance at the next question just so we can know what we're looking for. It can reasonably be inferred that Irma the waitress thinks Lemmy is through eating because. And by the way, it's okay if you forget the question as you read. It's fine, especially like a locatable reference point question, because you have a dot. You know that there's a question there, so it's okay. So we're going to continue reading. We were over here, right? Well, Lemmy read about the Peace of Paris signed on the 13th of May 1814 between France and the Allied powers. His right hand managed again and again to bring food up to his mouth. Sometimes he chewed, sometimes he swallowed whole the food that he had no idea he was eating. The Congress of Vienna met, with some allowance for delays, early in November of the same year, and all the powers engaged in war on either side sent plenipotentiaries. It was by far the most splendid and important assembly ever convoked to discuss and determine the affairs of Europe. The Emperor of Russia, the King of Prussia, the King of Bavaria, Denmark, and Württemberg all were present in person at the court of the Emperor Francis I in the Austrian capital. When Lemmy put down his fork and began to count them off, one by one, on the fingers of his left hand, the waitress, whose name was Irma, thought he was through eating and tried to take his plate away. So then we see the dot. There was a question in that sentence. So let's just make sure we know what the question is again. It can reasonably be inferred that Irma, the waitress, thinks Lemmy's through eating because. So why does Irma think that Lemmy's through eating? So it says right here, Irma thought he was through eating, right? Why did he do that? Again, I'm trying to answer the question before I look at the answer choices. And also, here's one thing that, another tip. It's easier when, especially for the SAT, things like this, for people who struggle reading, just try to break down a sentence to its main components. The sentence right here, look at all the the sentence we're focusing on right here. Look at all the commas. Look at it's a long sentence. So just kind of break it down into its main verb and subject, basically, right? It says, when Lemmy put down his fork and began to count them off one by one on the fingers of his left hand, the waitress, whose name was Irma, thought he was through eating and tried to take his plate away. So we can just break it down to when Lemmy put down his fork and began to count them off. Just like when Lemmy put down his fork, blah, blah, blah. The waitress, you can just break it down to the waitress. Who cares about the name, right? The waitress thought he was done eating. So when Lemmy put down his fork, the waitress thought he was done eating. When Lemmy put down his fork, the waitress thought he was done eating. So see how if you just kind of take away the fluff, it's easier to see the components of a sentence, like just the main components. That's really what the sentence is trying to say. When Lemmy put down his fork, the waitress thought he was done eating. right? And that's what the question is trying to tell us or ask us, right? And then the rest is just fluff. It's just saying the rest is just saying that when Lemmy put down his fork, he put it down to like count the people that he was reading about, and then she thought he was done. That's all it was. But the fingers thing matter? Not really. It doesn't matter to a question. So just break it down into what you need. So now, why do we think that Irma thought he was done eating? Well, according to what it says right here, it says when Lemmy put down his fork. I think is because he put down his fork. So that's why she thought he was done eating. So let's look for an answer choice that's similar to that one. Let's see, number 3. He will number A. He has begun reading his book. No, he was already reading the book. His plate is empty. It doesn't say anywhere that his plate is empty. He's no longer holding his fork. Yes, that's exactly what I said. And then D, he has asked her to clear the table. He doesn't ask her to clear the table anywhere in the text. So again, I used evidence for why I didn't choose an answer. I used evidence for why I chose my answer. I tried to break down the sentence that I was working with as much as I could, so I could get the main components that are important. And I also I tried to answer the question first before I looked at the answer choices. So number 4. Lemmy's primary impression of the party of 4, line 42, is that they. So then now we're just going to try to look for Lemmy's impression of the party of 4. And then we're just going to continue reading. We were right here, where these lines are, right here. He stopped her. Prince Metternich, his right thumb, presided over the Congress, and Prince Talleyrand, the index finger, represented France. A party of 4, 2 men and 2 women, came into the restaurant, all talking at once, and took possession of the center table nearest Lemmy. So now we have a dot here, so we might think, oh, there's a question there. But we know that that's not enough to answer the question. It's the primary impression of the party of 4. That sentence alone doesn't give us enough for the impression that Lemmy has, so we're just going to keep reading, but we know that we're close to our answer. So a party of 4, 2 men and 2 women, came into the restaurant, all talking at once, and took possession of the center table nearest Lemmy. The women had shingled hair and short tight skirts which exposed the underside of their knees when they sat down. One of the women had the face of a young boy, but disguised by one trick or another, rug, lipstick, powder, wet bangs plastered against a high forehead, and a pair of long pendant earrings, to look like a woman of 35, which, as a matter of fact, she was. The men were older. They laughed more than there seemed any occasion for, while they were deciding between soup and shrimp cocktail, and their laughter was too loud. But it was the women's voice, the terrible, not quite silver pitch of the women's voice, which caused Lemmy to skim over 2 whole pages without knowing what was going on them. So I think that was enough, right, to really understand his reaction of them. So right here, it's just kind of a description of them, like how they look. But then right here, these couple sentences right here is where we we can infer how Lemmy feels about these people, right? It says that they're too loud, that the women's voices were terrible. They caused Lemmy to skim over 2 whole pages without knowing what was on them. So they caused him to skip over 2 whole pages without knowing what was on them. He got distracted, right? He got distracted or annoyed. He got distracted or annoyed by them, basically. That's basically what it's saying. So I think the answer is, what was his primary impression of the party of 4? Basically that they were really loud and annoying and obnoxious. So now I'm going to look over the answer choices and look for one that is similar to my answer. Because usually you're right, okay? You're right. Usually you're right. Your gut is right, okay? So number 4, Lemmy's primary impression of the party of 4 is that they, A, are noisy and distracting. Yeah, that's pretty much what I said. B, are a refreshing change from the other customers. The passage has not yet mentioned another customer other than Lemmy. It's only mentioned Lemmy and the book, and the waitress. C, resemble characters from his history book. He never says in the passage that they resemble characters from his history book, and the characters are actually, if anything, quite different from the people from the party of 4, and it's not even a character because history books don't have characters. And then D, present glamour and youth. No, he doesn't say that at all. That's not what he thinks. He's not saying, wow, they look so young. In fact, he's saying they look old. You can see right here, it says one of the women had the face of a young boy, and disguised it by one trick or another, but actually was a woman of 35. So he's saying that they're old. So it doesn't at all show glamour and youth, right? So the answer is A. He thinks that they're noisy and distracting. Next question, which choice provides the best evidence? And as a matter of fact, we already know what line it should probably be, because where did we get our evidence? What made us think A was the right answer? Which choice made us think that A was the right answer? And if you go back to what I underlined here, it was this line right here. That's what these lines right here are what made me think that Lemmy thought they were noisy and annoying. Lines 55, between line 55 and 60, just the part where it says that they were too loud, that it was a woman's voice, and that it caused Lemmy to skim over 2 whole pages without knowing what was on them. So now I'm gonna, since I know that that's a sentence that shows us the opinion Lemmy has on the party of 4, I'm gonna look for the answer choice that is similar to what I chose. So an answer choice is between line numbers 55 and 60. And let's see. Look at that line, choice C, lines 55 through 59. And I'm not even gonna look at the other ones because I already showed myself and I already used evidence for how to answer the previous question, and I already know that this isn't where I got my information. This is where I got my information to answer that question. And then now we're gonna go to the next question. That was easy, right? Number 6, the narrator indicates that Lemmy finally closes the history book because. So now we're gonna continue reading and we're gonna keep that in mind. So we were right here at Fortunately, he realized this and went back. Otherwise, he might never have known about the secret treaty concluded between England, France, and Austria when the pretensions of Prussia and Russia, acting in concert, seemed to threaten a renewal of the attack. The results of the Congress were stated clearly at the bottom of page 67 and at the top of page 68, but before Lemmy got halfway through them, a coat that he recognized as his father was hung on the hook next to his chair. Lemmy closed the book and said, "I didn't think you were coming." So now you understand why I call it a non-locatable reference point, because they didn't tell us exactly where, but that there is a specific place where that event happened. So the question said, Lemmy closed the history book, and there's a specific place where Lemmy closed the history book right here. Lemmy closed the book. So they didn't tell us it was this paragraph. They didn't say line 70, but there's a specific place where that happened, right? So now why do we think he closed the history book? Let's try to answer that question ourselves. Why did Lemmy close the history book? Well, I think he closed the history book because his dad showed up. It says right here, a coat that he recognized as his father was hung on the hook next to his chair, and Lemmy said, "I didn't think you were coming." So Lemmy is surprised that his father came, so he closed the book. He's surprised that his father came, or the fact that his father came is the reason he closed the book. So let's go look for an answer that's similar to that. So 6A, his father has joined him at the table. Yeah, basically that's what I said. B, the people at the other table are too disruptive. Yeah, they're disruptive. We know that. We acknowledged that he thinks they're noisy, but he kept reading. And then after that, he never mentioned them again. So no, that's not why he closed the history book. He has finished a chapter about the Congress. No, in fact, it says that he never got to it. It says the results of the Congress were stated there, but before Lemmy got halfway through them, he saw that his father was there. So he never actually finished reading the chapter about Congress. He's preparing to leave the restaurant. No, it doesn't say anywhere in that passage or in that paragraph that he was trying to leave the restaurant. So again, I give myself evidence for why I chose something and why I did not choose something. Number 7, the primary impression created by the narrator's description of Mr. Peters in lines 74 through 79 is that he is. So now we're going to continue reading, and we're just going to keep that question in mind. Time is probably no more unkind to supporting characters. By the way, I'm right here. Time is probably no more unkind to supporting characters than it is to other people, but physical decay unsustained by respectability is somehow more noticeable. Mr. Peters' hair was turning gray, and his scalp showed through on top. He had lost weight also. He no longer filled out his clothes the way he used to. His color was poor, and the flower had disappeared from his buttonhole. In its place was an American Legion button. So for some reason right now I don't remember the question, but I know that this is where the question's going to be. So I'm just going to tell myself what's happening here. So right here, this part right here is just kind of saying that he's old. He looks old, like he looks run down, right? I think that's all really that it's saying. And then number 7 was the primary impression created by the narrator's description of Mr. Peters. So again, I think that what it really says is just that he's kind of old and just wear down, right? It says his hair is turning gray, his scalp shows, he lost weight, he doesn't fill out his clothes anymore. He just looks, his color was poor. He looks kind of sick and tired and old, right? So I'm going to look for something that is similar to what I said. Healthy and fit? Nope, the opposite of what I said. Angry and menacing? It doesn't say anywhere that it doesn't show his mood. It's just talking about his physical appearance. Nervous and hesitant? Again, it doesn't show, they're not talking about mood. They're just talking about his physical appearance. Aging and shriveled? Yeah, pretty much what I said. Old and kind of tired and looking like run down. So again, I did all the things that I told you about, right? So number 8, the main idea of the last paragraph is that Mr. Peters, so now we're going to keep reading and just keep that in mind. So again, I'm right here at apparently. Apparently, he himself was not aware that there had been any change. He straightened his tie self-consciously, and when Irma handed him a menu, he gestured with it so that the 2 women at the next table would notice a diamond ring on the 4th finger of his right hand. Both of these things, and also the fact that his hand showed signs of the manicurist, one can blame on the young man who had his picture taken with a derby hat on the back of his head, and also sitting with the girl on the curve of the moon. The young man had never for 1 second deserted Mr. Peters. He was always there, tugging at Mr. Peters' elbow, making him do things that were not becoming in a man of 45. So what is this paragraph trying to say? It just says apparently he himself was not aware of any change. So it's saying that, it's just basically saying that he wasn't aware that there was any change. He doesn't, before here it said he looked old, right? That he looks old and shriveled. That's what the previous question said. Basically told us that the answer was. And he doesn't believe it. He's not aware of this, so he doesn't think he's old. And then you can see right here, the rest of it just kind of shows you how he doesn't think he's old. He's bragging about a diamond ring on his hand, that he's married. And it says, and he straightened his tie self-consciously. He gestured to the women. And it says right here, the young man had never for 1 second deserted Mr. Peters. So, like, the young man inside him never left, that he still feels young, right? So that's basically what it's saying. The main idea of the last paragraph is that Mr. Peters, and I would say that the main idea is of the last paragraph is that Mr. Peters doesn't feel the age he's in, right? If he's old, but he doesn't feel old, he feels younger. So I'm going to look for something that looks like what I said. So A, neglects to spend any time with his family members. It doesn't say that anywhere, and either way, he's spending time with his son. But anyways, like, it doesn't even say that anywhere in the passage, right? Behaves as if he was a younger version of himself. Yeah, that's basically what I said, just saying that he doesn't feel old. He acts young and feels young. C is very conscious of symbols of wealth and power. It doesn't say that anywhere. Yes, he brags about his ring, but maybe it was a really cheap ring. We don't know. So there's no symbols of wealth or power in the passage that can make us assume that. And then D, he is preoccupied with the knowledge that he's growing old. It's the opposite. He doesn't care. He thinks he's young. He doesn't notice that he's growing old, right? So we used evidence, and we use exact evidence from the passage to justify our choices. We're not just saying like, oh, I think this is right because it kind of makes sense, because maybe the one about wealth and power kind of makes sense because there's the mention of a ring, but you don't think about it, right? You just like, oh, it makes sense, choose C, right? You have to actually think about it and think and give yourself an actual supported reason for why you're choosing something, okay? Number 9, which choice best supports the conclusion that Mr. Peter wants to attract attention? So let's try to answer that without looking at the answer choices. What sentence shows that he wants to attract attention? Personally, I think it's this part over here. The one where he says he straightened his tie self-consciously, and when Irma handed him a menu, he gestured with it so that the 2 women at the next table would notice a diamond ring on the 4th finger of his right hand. Right? You can see right here he gestured so that the 2 women at the next table would notice the diamond ring. He purposely gestured so that those women would notice him. So I think this part shows that he wants attention. So basically, like, between, like, maybe line 81, or like he gestured, so like line 83, around there. Let's see if there's an answer choice that fits there. Look at that, line 81 through 85. So just like I said, so it starts with he straightened and ends with hand. Let's see. He strained, yes, he straightened his tie self-consciously when Irma handed him a menu. He gestured with it so that the two women at the next table would notice a diamond ring on the fourth finger of his right hand. So just exactly the sentence that I said, right? So I try to answer the question before I looked at the answer choices. So B. And I'm not even going to look at the other ones because I know it's right, because I understood the passage and I'm using evidence and I'm really trying to see what the passage is saying. Last one, number 10, as used in line 93, becoming most nearly means. And we already read that, right? So let's just read it again real quickly. He was always there tugging at Mr. Peter's elbow, making him do things that were not becoming in a man of 45. So the young person inside Mr. Peters was always tugging at him and making him do things that were not becoming in a man of 45. So let's just use a synonym. What do you think it means? Like, I kind of think it means, like, that the young person inside Mr. Peters was always trying to force him to do things that were not, like, appropriate for somebody that age, right? That were not appropriate, were not right, that didn't make sense for somebody of that age. So let's look for a word that is similar to what I just said. So the young man, Mr. Peters, was trying to make him do something that was emerging of a man of 45, that was not fitting for a man of 45, that was not developing, or that was not happening. I think it's fitting, right? Emerging, developing, and happening, that doesn't have anything to do with saying that it's not appropriate, or that it doesn't work, or that it doesn't fit, right, for somebody that age. So fitting is the best choice for that. So hopefully you understood more what I mean about my techniques for the SAT reading section. So you are annotating the passage based on the type of questions that there are. You read the questions first. Then after you read the questions, you start reading the passage. You only read it once. And sorry, I'm out of breath for some reason. You only read it once, and as you read, you answer the questions. Obviously this takes longer because I'm stopping to explain, and I'm trying to not do it too fast, and etc. But I promise that it'll be fast once you become a pro at it, okay? And then we still have one more question to answer, and it's the first one. Sometimes that's the only con of the way of doing this, is that sometimes you forget about the questions that you leave off. So number 1 was a whole passage question. What were the cars of the passage the primary focus shifts from? So let's try to answer that question again, right? So at the beginning of the passage, it was just kind of like a description of the restaurant, and then Lemmy reading the book. And then it shifts to like a description of like his dad, and then just like, yeah, like just like a description of his dad, right? So let's look at an answer choice, see which one look similar to what I said. So A, Lemmy's inner thoughts to observations made by the other characters. No, it's never really in the perspective of any other character. B, an exchange between strangers to satisfy a personal relationship. In the beginning, there is no exchange between strangers. So maybe satisfying personal relationship, you could argue that's the last part, right? The part with his dad, because I guess it's just Lemmy and his dad. But the thing is that, not really. That's not the best way to describe it. And then the first part, an exchange between strangers, that's not true. So both parts have to be true, right? And then C, the physical setting of the scene to the different characters' personality traits. And then D, Lemmy's experience reading a book to descriptions of people in the restaurant. So then I think the answer would be D, because see the physical setting. Yes, that's correct, right? It starts with the physical setting of the scene. We know that. We answered a question about it, that the beginning is just a setting. But then to the different characters' personality traits, we don't really learn it at all about the character's personality traits. Do we learn anything about Irma? Do we learn anything about Lemmy himself, basically like the main character? Do we learn anything about the Party of Four? No, not really, right? We do learn a little bit about Lemmy's dad, but that's about it. But most of the passages about Lemmy reading his book, right, and how he feels reading the book, and then it turns to the description of the Party of Four and the description of his dad. So it starts with Lemmy reading his book, and it ends with like a description of the people that come into the restaurant. So that's the best answer. We use evidence for it. And that's pretty much it. We will do during the program, we'll do more practice tests. This is just like an introduction. Hopefully you understood it. Go ahead and tell me if you have any questions always. And once you become a pro at it, I promise it'll be fast and it'll save you so much time, okay? So I'll see you in the next video.